Hello.
Hello, morning, Justin.
Hello, Eng Soon. Who?
Yeah.
How are you?
Okay. Great. Morning. Okay, let's get started. Okay, let me talk some introduce first. Okay.
So are we starting now?
Yes. Just start intros about this event.
Okay. So hang on. So I have I'm not ready yet. So I mean, has the actual event starts, or are we going to start at 10 o'clock?
9 o'clock.
Oh, it's already started. Oh yes, 9 o'clock. I mean, in your time, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, your side is your side is
Yes.
your side is 9 o'clock.
Yes, 10 o'clock.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Very good morning to everyone. Thank you for joining us in an early morning of a Saturday. I hope you have a nice coffee today. Okay. Welcome to our monthly Singapore.NET Developer Community Meetup in October 2020. I hope all you are coping well in the current COVID-19 situation. We have not been in touch for a while, and I hope to bring some positive energy to our community by bringing back our monthly meetup. I am Eng Soon, host of today's Hacktoberfest. I am happy to have my teammates Marvin, Chunling, Riza, Justin, Nilesh, PT, and myself. You can always reach out to us on the Meetup page or our YouTube channel if you like to join us as a speaker in our monthly Meetup. Without the support from you all, our community cannot grow to this scale. We are currently looking for a new batch of speakers. If you are interested to contribute to our community as our speaker, please definitely reach out to us on our Meetup page. The link is in the description of the YouTube video. Together, we learn better. Okay, what is Hacktoberfest? Hacktoberfest is a month-long celebration of open source software run by DigitalOcean. Whether you are a developer, student, learning to code, event host, or company of any size, you can help drive growth of open source and make positive contribution to an ever growing community. All background and skill level are encouraged to complete the challenge. You can sign up anytime from now until 31st of October. To encourage the spirit of open source community, we again are hosting Hacktoberfest for our fellow developer in Singapore this year on YouTube Live. This year, there is a change in the rules of participation in the Hacktoberfest. In order to encourage a high quality of work to the open source community, I hereby encourage you all to read through the rules so that you can successful to earn your award. Also, seeing this year in the YouTube Live, please remember to hold. If you got any question, you can. Okay. If you got any question, you can chat at YouTube, the chat box. Finally, please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel to give us and support. Thank you very much. Today, we are proud to have focused 4 speakers to share different interesting topics, which will empower you more in the Hacktoberfest. We had Justin, our first speaker from Microsoft. He will share with us a few tips to increase our chance to get our pull request accepted by the maintainer. Our second speaker is Nilesh. In this session, Nilesh will share some common DevOps workflow like static code analysis, building Docker image, and deploying to Kubernetes using GitHub Actions. Next, we will have Eng Teong as our speaker in the afternoon session. If not planned before you add, this will help you understand what DevOps is and how to plan a DevOps transformation journey. Finally, to some of you, this may be your first pull request in GitHub. So let's learn together to understand how you can make your first open source contribution. Okay, let's begin. Okay, let's pass to to Justin. Wait, let me share to. Okay, Justin, can you share your slide? I will.
Sure. So can we start now? It's 10 minutes earlier.
Yes. And
so 10 minutes earlier. That's fine.
Okay, Justin.
So yeah, I'm gonna share my screen now.
Okay.
So you can see on my screen. So can everyone see my screen now?
Very well.
Yep. So so what's the latency of this the Teams Live in Singapore?
10 seconds to 20 seconds. Okay, can see your slide already.
Cool. So even if so I'm scheduled start. I'm supposed to start at 10 o'clock, so we can start it now, 10 minutes earlier. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. Right. So let's start. So good morning, everyone. So let's talk about the story when we sent a PR to an open source project. So I'm going to show. This session is mostly about talks, not doing any demos or something like that, and is mainly for the entry level, the open source contributors. So if any of you are very new to Git or GitHub or open source project, this session will be very helpful. But if you are already experienced open source the contributors, that's also fine. You will get some another idea, another insights that you haven't done so far, or you maybe check I have been doing good or something like that, right? So everyone has experienced that my PR gets accepted or sometimes rejected. But have you thought about the reason why my PR is accepted or my PR is rejected? Have you thought about that? There is some secret around that. So my name is Justin. I work for the Microsoft as a cloud advocate here. So this is my Twitter handle. So if you like, you can mention me on the social media using this social media profile. Or if you want to see the entire portfolio of my GitHub open source project, you can visit my GitHub handle. Also, if you like, you can visit at the URL at the bottom of this page to see my introduction or something like that. So let me start telling about my story back in 10 years ago. 10 years ago, when I was a junior web developer, I started using an open source project for the first time. In fact, I probably used many open source projects without knowing them before, far before that. But what I'm trying to say now is that it was my first awareness that I was using the open source project. So that open source was Umbraco, because my job as a web developer was to build a website using this Umbraco open source project. So Umbraco is a content management system written in .NET. I'm saying .NET, not .NET Core, because back in 10 years ago, there was no .NET Core thing. So only .NET framework. You know, the .NET framework is a proprietary one, so it's not open source. But the .NET framework, the ecosystem, provide a lot of open sources, open source libraries, open source projects, whatever. Umbraco was one of them. So when I first saw it, as I said, .NET itself was not an open source, but it has a big ecosystem. It has a big ecosystem in .NET world. Also, Umbraco is content management system like WordPress or something like that, and based on .NET. And I'm pretty sure that until now, Umbraco is one of the most popular content management system in the world using .NET, and it has its own ecosystem. So there are many open source libraries or open source packages to extend or enrich or improve the Umbraco, the CMS itself, like using the themes or extensions or whatever, right? So Umbraco was very good open source, the libraries, open source platform. So however, even if I have been using the Umbraco for the day-to-day job, and I knew that this was the open source library, but I was still not convinced, or I was still skeptical whether I could do contribution to Umbraco system or any other open source project at that time, or even after a few years. Because I was a junior developer, and I thought open source contribution is something that the senior level developers can do, not the junior level things. Oh, okay, right? So probably if you are in a junior level, yeah, I think most junior level developers would think like me. So I was very scared. I was not ready to contribute to anything at that time. Then, back in 5 years ago, in year 2015, I met a threshold. I faced a threshold, so I changed my mind. So what happened to me? I decided to push my code to an open source project. Wow, it's a big change, yeah? So it was my first PR that got merged. So personally, it was a sort of very historical moment to me, because until then, I only wrote a code only for myself or only for my customers, not for everyone else. Now I push my code to the open source project, which means I rebuild my code to the public. So it's kind of very weird feeling that sometimes I felt kind of naked, because everyone can see me. Everyone can see. Everyone was able to see my code, my coding style. They can, if they can criticize my code. Your code is blah blah blah. So this experience has changed my whole mindset. Actually, I only wrote code for myself or my company or my client, but now I decided to write my code for the community. So it's really a good change, and it's actually the growth. It grew my mindset. So I believe this is a good change for me. So this is the screenshot of my first PR. So as you can see, this is you can still find it on GitHub. So as you can see, it was Azure, the quick start ARM template thing. So it was merged in 2015, and it took about a week when I raised a PR to get it merged. Right. So during this week, that week, the many conversations going forward and backward about which is about, can you? So it works on my machine, but it didn't work on my machine. Oh, okay. So can you change a little bit of this part, or can you improve this code quality or something like that? So these kind of feedbacks going forward and backward. So I got the really good experience from the reviewer that so they provide me a very constructive feedback that I missed or in my blind side. Right. So it was really a good experience that I missed something, and they could see my code, which is a really good thing. So getting my PR merged was really a good experience. I still, if I was asked to, can you explain the feeling that your first PR get merged? I still can't express my feeling, because it's kind of very complicating feeling. But what I can say is it was awesome. So after this open source contribution, at that time it was my first year of my MVP the award. So after that, the MVP team gave me an appreciation of my open source contribution, as well as Azure in general. And eventually, because of this, I think it's more than that anyway. So the first year, from the second year, I got double awarded from Azure and developer technologies. So because of those kind of open source contribution. So after that, after this experience, open source contribution has become a part of my everyday life. It's part of my job now, and I can't live it without open source anyway. Right? So all my code using for my application development, or for demo, or POC, or community contribution, they are all relying on the open source project anyway. And also I found that there are so many electronic devices around me. They are all using open source libraries or open source packages, whatever they call. So yeah, I found that open source is everywhere. So if I do feel, I think you feel the same thing. So I think this sort of experience can happen to almost everyone, because everyone used to be a newbie to the open source the community. And you, yeah, as I said, you may have got the similar feelings to mine. Oh, I'm scared. How dare I can I contribute to the open source projects because I'm not in that level. Don't worry. So everyone was the newbie. So if we are, let's assume that if we are new to open source, what can we do for it other than just using it? So let's talk about what we can do if we are all newbies to the open source communities. To me, contribution itself doesn't limit us to write actual code. Writing code and sending a PR to the open source project is really important. Yeah, I get that, but that's not all. Jumping into a discussion is also a good contribution. If there is an issue, open an issue ticket and start a discussion. There must be someone who supports or against yours. So we start debating, we start the discussion on that particular issue. After starting a discussion, it must be closed with a certain outcome. Based on that outcome, you or someone may create a PR to reflect that outcome. But sometimes sometimes a kind of issue will be closed without an outcome, right? But that's still okay, because at least you will know there was a discussion and there was a conclusion that this doesn't have an outcome and it is still worth having. But we are now talking about the Hacktoberfest thing, which is focusing about the PR pull request thing. So let's focus on the PR in this session, by the way. So as I said, we are all assuming that we are all new to open source, and we are all new to Git and GitHub. So as a newbie, I want to contribute to an open source project by changing some code bits and pieces, so that I want to, be a part of open source community. So people said that in order to contribute your code change, you should create a PR to get my changes applied. Okay, so PR. So they said PR. Okay. So what is the PR then? I have no idea what it is, because I'm new. Because I'm new to Git. I'm new to GitHub. Actually, PR is not the concept of Git. It's a concept of GitHub, or sort of the online repository services like a GitHub or Bitbucket or something like that, right? So it seems that I need to understand the concept the first. So actually, yeah, as I said, PR is a sort of tricky concept while using Git and GitHub. PR stands for the pull request. Literally, it is a kind of ask to pull something from me. So I'm asking you to pull something from me. That's the pull request. Okay. So what are you going to pull me? what are you going to pull something from me? Still not clear. Okay, I get a little bit of that, but it's still not clear. So this is the official GitHub the document. So GitHub defines a PR like this. GitHub says pull request lets you tell others about changes you have pushed to a branch in a repository on GitHub. Okay. yeah, kind of makes sense, but I still don't get it. Oh, okay. So yeah, I want to understand in a plain English, right? So it sounds like it seems to be too technical for the newcomers. So I drew a diagram for you. I think that's the best and simplest diagram ever. Yeah, I'm breaking myself. So there is a main branch in orange. I got something to change. So I forked the repo to create a branch in green. So it's kind of, I've got something to change. So let me change something for you. Then commit many changes on my local. As many changes as I want, right? So once the changes made on my end, I'm happy to what I've done on my branch. Then I should let the main branch know that, all right, I'm done. I'm ready to get to pull my changes. Can you do that? That's the pull request. Then everything looks good. It will be merged back to the main branch. So I said I forked the branch. So you can say it is I create a separate branch, or I fork the repo to work on my branch, work on my side. So whatever you call it, the concept is that we should be away from the main branch and work on our own thing, then back to the main branch. So that's the main workflow of the PR. So you send a PR to the main branch. You send a PR to the maintainers. So do you think your PR gets immediately accepted or rejected? That's totally different story, right? So I sent a PR. That doesn't mean your PR will get accepted or your PR get rejected, right? So not every PR is accepted by maintainers. So it really depends on what your PR look like, right? So simply submitting a PR means nothing, really. So I think sending a PR is only the beginning of the discussion. What the PR is about, whether the PR need to be accepted or not, or why the maintainers should accept your PR, how the PR will go once it gets merged, and so on, and so on, and so on. So all the discussion is going to start from your PR. So sending a PR pull request is not just about changing code. It's rather close to the discussion and collaboration thing. Right? So PR is actually represents a fundamental nature of collaboration. So you work with your team, or you send a PR to an open source project. It's just one type of collaboration. Therefore, as I said, the nature of PR is basically the communication and collaboration. So if you do well, your PR will get accepted. Otherwise, it will be rejected. So I said, if you do well. So what does it mean by that? So what should I do well? So what do we consider when sending a PR? Or what should we do for the open source contribution in general? So think about this. The first thing is code of conduct. So have you heard of this term, code of conduct? So code of conduct is a kind of the commitment for the open in terms of the open source communities. So it's a commitment for open source maintainers and contributors, and between both. We are doing. Sorry about that. So what we should do while maintaining and contributing to the open source project, right? So this is kind of definition. What we need to do, what we need to coherent, what we need to comply. So this is an example. This is a .NET Core project. It includes the code of conduct page that links to the .NET Foundation one. You can do this. You can declare the code of conduct like this way, or you can explicitly write all your code of conduct with your own thing. So either way is fine. Either way is fine. But if you link to the .NET Foundation code of conduct, or if whatever, whether you link to the .NET Foundation code of conduct or you write your own code of conduct things, that's the main thing. It contains a lot of information, but its main message is all about respect, all about the respect, which brings about diversity and inclusion, which means all activities, including like creating issues, sending leaving comments, or the sending a PR, should not use any excluding expressions. Should not use any harmful expressions. So excluding expressions or harmful expressions, meaning somebody will get hurt from that kind of expressions if we don't carefully choose the word, right? Sometimes people get complaining. People will be complaining. Oh, it's so difficult to write some the comments or write some the expressions because I can't use my own humor or joke or memes, whatever. Yeah, sometimes joke or memes can be very culture specific. So in some cases, it is acceptable, but in the other culture, it's not acceptable. Some kind of that. So, but to bring a humor, it's not just using that kind of joke or meme thing. So if we carefully choose the expressions, we still enjoy humors in a respectful way. That's the main thing, right? So code of conduct is all about the respect. Respect others, respect us, ourselves, or respect others, and respect all of us. Because the open source project is maintained by human beings behind. Right? We are all humans. Sometimes we get encouraged, we are enjoying. Sometimes we got depressed or we got hurt because of the words and expressions. So another one is guidelines. So there are the contribution guidance or contribution guidelines. So many open source projects have their own guidelines to follow. So it can be anything. It can be anything actually that helps keep the code quality high. If they don't, they will have at some stage, or if they don't have, then you should follow in general the common sense. So this is a screenshot taken from the .NET Core project. So it explicitly states that .NET Core project really cares for the compatibility. Because, so we are going to release .NET 5 soon, the public release soon. That means I have to consider all the cross-platform things. I have to consider all the backward compatibility back to .NET Framework. I have to consider all the compatibility for the Windows, Windows library or something like that. Right? This has never taken into consideration before, but we are considering all those compatibilities. Otherwise, this .NET Core runtime will be in trouble. So if you change something, that must comply all those permutations of compatibilities. Otherwise your PR will not get accepted. Right? And how can we ensure my code changes are all compatible with all the platforms, all the permutations or possibilities? That's the test. We should include the test code to cover those changes, right? So I will talk that later. So contributing guidelines also contains the list of do's, list of don'ts. What that means is by contributing a code, and you can do in this way, or you cannot do in this way, right? So yeah, there are a list of do's and don'ts. So we need to consider those things. I will take it. I will take it later on. Also, if you bring your code changes with breaking changes, sometimes it happens. But if you do, I don't think your PR will get accepted, because it brings about breaking changes. So unless you provide the maintainers with reasonable explanations or justifications, your breaking changes will not be accepted. Right? So we need to be very careful for that. Therefore, to avoid your PR from being rejected, it's always a good practice to find existing relevant issues or create a new issue first that supports your changes. So there are always cases that if you feel something to be fixed, someone has already raised the issue. Someone has already made some changes or something like that. So before changing anything, create an issue or find a relevant issue first. Then we can start from there. Also, we are a newbie to the open source project now. So no one expects you to contribute a big thing. We can start from small. We can always start from small. So actually, the many open source projects provide some labels like this. Many open source projects provide some labels for us to jump in easily and quickly. So this is the .NET Core, the repository. They put two labels for us. One is up for grabs, and the other is easy. Up for grab, if the tag up for grab is labeled, then that issue is open to the external contributors. So which means I can do it as an open source contributor. And another label is called easy, which means is the small thing or very easy thing for the first time contributors. So yeah, so if you like to jump in the .NET Core runtime, the contribution, yeah, you should find those two labels so that you can easily jump in and you can easily do the contribution, right? So as long as you start issues with these labels, yeah, your entry bar will get lower, so which is really good. So as I mentioned before, let's talk about what we can do during our contributions. There are many things you should do before sending a PR. So yeah, this is I kept telling this. I kept telling this because it's really important. It's always a good practice that you lodge an issue and start a discussion first. Then, with a reasonable outcome from the discussion, you can write changes and put the PR for it. By doing so, you will be fully supported by the project maintainers because they know what the PR is about. But sometimes you can send a PR out of the blue, or sometimes people send the PR out of the blue. Yeah, I did many times. Yeah, but if I do that, it will scare the project maintainers, right? Project maintainers will be afraid of those PR out of the blue because they have no idea what the PR is about. They have no context in that. Therefore, to avoid this kind of scareness, this kind of surprising, pilot issue first and add some context of that issue. What the issue is about and what we need to do in this way, what we need to do in that way. Then they will give you a feedback, and yeah, based on the feedback and outcome, you do change your PR, then maintainers will understand it. Okay, this PR is all about this thing. So I know that context. So then they will make a decision to accept or reject. And the chance is high to get accepted, right? Because they know the context. Sometimes the issues can start from small, but it grows up very quickly and it expands to multiple topics. In this case, create another issue for those multiple topics. It's purely for tracking purpose. It's purely for tracking purpose. So GitHub provides a way for tracking mechanism, like I'm using the hashtag, right? Hashtag with issue number, these kind of things. So we can easily track the multiple issues in one place. So it's always a good idea to split one big issue into multiple small issues. Say, for example, if I start an issue A, issue 1, then as the discussion goes on, we found that it's relevant to the issue 2, issue 3, issue and 4, right? In that case, we need to create the respective issues, right? So which is about issue 1, issue 2, issue 3. Then we all track in one place, right? So which is really good. Otherwise, if your issue is too big, and it will result in your PR gets really big as well. So it is also good for the single responsibility principles. Okay. So make it small. That's always a good the practice. Also, if your issue is about a bug or something like that, then it's always a good idea to include reproducing procedure. So if I put how to reproduce this issue, then maintainers understand, okay, this is the bug, and how I reproduce the same bug on my end, something like that. If you don't provide the reproduction process, then maintainers is unlikely to accept your PR because they have no idea how to reproduce it. And they are not convinced your PR is really changing or something. So in general, unless you are the project maintainer, you are not allowed to directly work on the original repository. So instead, you are encouraged to fork the repo to your account and make changes on your end. That's the first step. Or, as I said before, you can create a new branch and working on that branch and create a PR. And that's another acceptable one. But from my perspective, although you are a project maintainer, it's always a good practice that you fork the original repo to yours and start working on it. And once you finish the changing the code, then send a PR, create a PR to the original repo. I think that's the safest way. And when you create a branch, and always create a branch with a name with very meaningful way. So that when you create a PR, maintainers will get an idea. Okay, this is a PR from this branch for this intention or something like that. So you need to convince the maintainers of your intentions by providing descriptions and by providing the branch names. Yeah. So you don't have to follow all these practices, but I'm recommending to follow these kind of practices. So each open source project has their own coding standard as well. Therefore, you should follow those coding standards. If you the discussion is all about explaining your intentions, explaining the consequences or something like that. But if you articulate what your PR is about, then yeah, maintainers will not get confused. Oh, okay, this PR is for this. Okay, looks good to me. Then merge it. Another tip. There is another tip to write your commit message. So actually, that's that's a recommended way by the Microsoft. So your commit messages should be imperative and declarative. What does that mean? So think about that. So the checking out a commit is actually changing the state of my local machine, right? So there is the commit header in here, but you are checking out this commit, which means the code status has changed from here to here, right? So which means we should let the developer know that if you change the status from here to here, you will have this status. So that's kind of declaration. So in this way, we should follow the commit message like declarative style or imperative style. What does that mean? Like add new feature, add this function, or update this function, delete unused method, or something like that. Not use do not use like deleted this the variables, updated this method, something like that, right? We don't have to use like past tense. We use just the imperative tense, so that people get understand. Okay, when I check out this commit to this commit, and I will add this feature. I will remove these variables or something like that, so that people can understand more clearly and easily. So we have looked into the list of what we can do for during the contribution. Now let's talk about what we cannot do. So this is I've mentioned a few times. So do not include any breaking changes, right? Because maintainers knows the direction. Maintainers have the direction. So my breaking change may be aligned with the direction with open source projects, but this is a very rare chance. So most of the time, your breaking changes will actually break the whole code, unless you are the maintainer, right? So try to avoid these kind of breaking changes. So if you really want to put some breaking changes, code breaking changes, then you should consult with project maintainers first by creating an issue. Also, do not surprise the project maintainers with a big amount of changes. Right? Sometimes it's okay to submit the big changes, but mostly it's not acceptable because there are so many files, so many lines of code to review for the maintainers to review. So mostly they will, if they find, oh, this is too big, then I think I have already I have done the similar experience before. So they will ask us to split the PR into a small chunk, so that they reduce the chance of surprise. Okay, so yeah, do not do any big changes unless it is really justified. But yeah, as I said, if you really wanted to put the big change, and as I said, issue first and further discussion, right? So this is a really important one. So always make it your habit. Like remember, issue first, PR follows. Always remember that. And sometimes the sometimes the maintainers are urged by the open source contributors. Can you have a look my PR as in your convenient time as soon as possible or something like that? But maintainers are also human, and they have their own job for living. Right? This kind of urging thing shouldn't be happening. So maintainers are also human beings. We are also human beings. They have their own pace to look after the open source project, and they are purely volunteering the open source maintainer. So yeah, we shouldn't urge the maintainers to have a look, review my PR or something like that. Yeah, all we can do is send you a PR with full context. Then they will have a look, and if it's okay, then it's fine. But if we create a PR with the lack of the context or the description, and then the PR process will get delayed, right? Also, it's because it's a Hacktoberfest, and there are high chances that so many spammy PRs is going in. So do not send any meaningless PR. So it's so some sort of the spammy PR means include some kind of writing style changes or punctuations or something like that. So it's a Hacktoberfest. Recently, there have been many incidents. I'm pretty sure many of you in here heard about the spammy PR things. So let's have a look what the spammy PR is about. So can you see the changes? Differences in the red line and green line. There are two dots at the end. Does it give any value to the open source project? No, I don't think so. So what's the point of this PR? So that PR sender is just send this PR to get a t-shirt, which is not acceptable. So let's look at this again. So the red line says this is a work in progress, and they changed the sentence. This work is in progress. So the sentence before in red line and sentence in the green line, do they have differences between in terms of the meaning? No. So this kind of meaningless spammy PRs happens quite a lot in these days, especially in October every year because of the Hacktoberfest, because they wanted to get a t-shirt for free. Yeah, so do not do this. Right. So let's wrap up. Throughout this session, I talked about what to do as an open source contributor. Contribution is all about communication and collaboration. Therefore, we should respect each other between maintainers and contributors. To help respect each other, we discuss code of conduct, contribution guidelines, and what we can do and what we cannot do. So for our to enjoy our open source contribution, we should think about following those kind of guidelines. So thanks for listening. If you have any questions, please leave in the chatting windows or mention me on the social media.
Yeah, thank you, Justin. I got one question from the audience.
Sure.
Is there a template or sample for a good PR description?
So I don't see. I cannot provide any the good example of this is a good the PR description, but follow the basic principles 5W1H things. Why we are doing that? What this PR is about? So how this is happening or something like that. So yeah, it's a basic writing style. So the problem state the problem situation, right? And what the action is taken because of through this PR, then what we are expecting after this PR or something like that. Then yeah, people will get convinced.
Okay, thank you, Justin.
Right.
Okay, thank you for your experience to share how to submit your first report. Yeah, because normally when we submit the first pull request, we always scan. Always remember we start from a newbie. Thank you very much, Justin.
No problem.
Enjoy your day.
Yep. Have a great day.
Have a great day. Okay.
Can I stop sharing my thing?
I can.
Yep.
Okay. Hi everyone. Thank you for waiting. Sorry for this technical troubles. So in this session, I'm going to talk about DevOps with GitHub Actions. My name is Nilesh Gule, and a bit about myself. I have posted the Twitter handle, LinkedIn, and other social media links here in case you want to connect with me. I'm also the co-organizer of Azure Singapore user group. So if you have been attending any of our sessions, you would have seen a lot of activity happening recently. Now, coming to today's session, what I'll be covering is how to get started with DevOps with GitHub Actions. So we'll have a quick overview of GitHub Actions. Then we will see how to integrate a very simple workflow. Then we will also look at how we can integrate third-party applications using GitHub Actions. And finally, we will go on to the CI/CD, doing continuous integration and continuous deployment onto a Kubernetes cluster using GitHub Actions. So let's get started with understanding what is DevOps. I hope you recognize this person. He is quite famous when it comes to the DevOps, and his name is Donovan Brown. We recently had a session with him saying "Ask me anything," and it was quite popular session when it came to some of the sessions we did as part of Azure Singapore. So Donovan Brown, he coined this term for DevOps, which says that it's a union of people, processes, and products to enable continuous delivery of value to our end users. And the key points here are the people, processes, and products, and to enable something of value to the end users. What does this mean is we try to automate everything that we do as part of our development process. There are various stages through which each product goes through, each application goes through. And as part of DevOps, if you look at that diagram, we try to automate, we try to have this continuous monitoring, continuous deployment cycle into our development practices. And earlier we used to have like separation between the dev teams and the operations team. What this process tries to do is to limit that gap or to reduce that gap. And instead of saying, I build my product over a period of 6 months and I then just pass it on to the ops team to deploy, we will try to bring this activities which are related to, let's say, creating a release, deploying it, building the infrastructure as early as possible in our development lifecycle. Some people like to call this as shift left. That means you shift the activities which used to happen late in your development and deployment cycle to the earlier stages of your software development lifecycle. And this is where we see a lot of things happening of late. And GitHub is one of the most common repository, open source code repository. And since Microsoft acquired GitHub, it is integrated very well into the whole Microsoft ecosystem. So if you had a chance to look at the keynote, which was done by Satya last week or 2 weeks back when the Ignite happened, we clearly saw that GitHub has a very prominent space when it comes to the different services which Microsoft is focusing on. So for today's discussion, let's try to focus on what are GitHub Actions and how do they help us in these activities. To define GitHub Actions, these are automated, these are customizable, and these execute some software development workflows on our repositories. So we have a repository. Let's say I have a project on GitHub and I want to perform some action when something happens. We can use these what are called as GitHub Actions to perform these automatically. And these are all event driven. So we can define workflows when something happens. So in the earlier session, Justin talked about when you create a pull request, when you push the code to the remote repository, these are the kind of events which we would typically like to catch and perform some action when that event happens. So if you look at the structure of the GitHub Actions, we have a series of jobs. So when an event occurs or an event is triggered, there is jobs, there are a set of jobs which get triggered, and each of these jobs, they have got certain actions, and these actions, they get executed onto a runner. So the problem that this process is trying to solve is when someone says it works on my machine. And when we try to integrate the software, let's say there is a big team of 10-15 people working, and they try to integrate their code at, let's say, regular frequency, once every week or once every month. And then you realize some of the things are working for one developer, whereas it doesn't work for the other developer. This could be because of some environment settings, something which the developer has installed on his local machine, but it's not available with the other developer. These kind of scenarios are what we try to eliminate by doing this regular checks, and every time somebody checks in the code, we want to make sure that it runs on an independent machine which has all the tools required, and that's where these runners comes into the picture. So the runner will have all the software that is required for performing an action. To get started, we have some starter workflows which GitHub Action provides. So I will show you this in the user interface when we start exploring the GitHub Actions. So these are like quick starts. You have certain kinds of projects, and you will get suggestions saying if you have a .NET project, or if you have a Java project, you have a Node.js application, how can you get quickly started with some of the actions? So these are the starter workflows to get you started quickly. Let's look at some of the events which are supported. So in order to trigger the workflow, we can have scheduled events. So these are like cron jobs. Let's say you have a job which needs to build your application, and you want to do it at the end of the week. So everybody checks in the code by end of Friday, and let's say Saturday morning or early Sunday, you want to build the complete application, and you want to see what are the things which are integrating well. So this can be done using scheduled events. We also have manual events, but where GitHub Actions really shines is the automated events or the webhooks. And for different kinds of actions, we have different webhooks. I've listed some of them here, but the most important one I feel is when we really push the code, or when we perform a pull request or the release of our code. That is where most of the GitHub actions would be more useful. So to summarize, or to look at what are the main components of GitHub Actions, we have the workflows, which are automated procedures. These are the different steps which get triggered. Then there are events. Events are the source of trigger, which trigger the workflows. Inside the events, we have jobs. So these jobs are a series of steps which we want to run on a particular runner. Within the jobs, we have individual tasks. So this will be performing one unique activity. So a job can contain multiple tasks, a series of tasks, and each task would be divided into the step. And then those steps, they get converted into actions. And finally, these actions, we need to run them somewhere. So that's where we have these runners. So you can think of runner as the software or the machine or a server where you have all the tools, all the tooling, and the required software required to run all these workflows. So for the demo, what I'll be doing is I will use a .NET Core application, and we will see how to use GitHub Actions on that. Let me go into the browser. And I'm trying to create a repo here. So let's start from a very basic step to see how do we get started with GitHub Actions. So Justin earlier, he talked about having your code repository. In order to start the GitHub Action, we need to have the code somewhere. So I'm starting a new repository here called as Hacktoberfest 2020. It's a public repository, and let's create this. So I would like to walk you through all the steps that are required in order to have your code triggered using GitHub Actions. So let me clone this repository. I will go into this Windows terminal and clone it here. So if you look at this, there is only one README file here, and there is a directory called as Hacktoberfest SG. So I want to create a new .NET project here, and I can say .NET new. Let me take it from one of the existing repository in order to avoid any of the typos. So I will correct the spelling here. So I've created a new project now, and if we look at the directory structure again, now we have this Hacktoberfest SG 2020 directory, which contains that project. And if I list, you can see it's a typical .NET Core project, which has a startup file, which has a program.cs file. It has the CS project and other things. So let me go and add one more thing, which is the git ignore. This is required so that I don't put things like the obj file or the bin file into my repository. This will again automatically create the git ignore file for me. Now let me just go one level up and open this in Visual Studio Code. So we have the code files here. Now let's go and check in this into our repository. So if I look at the git status for this, we can see that we have added a new repository and there is nothing available in the remote repository. So I will add all the files and then I will also add a commit. Saying initial commit. And then let's go and push this to our remote repository. So if everything is successful, we should have our code in the repository here. And you can see that the README file and the project was uploaded to the GitHub repository. Now let's say I want to start with a GitHub action on this. I want to perform some action when somebody pushes the code. The easiest thing is again relating to what Justin was saying earlier about coding standards and following the practices, best practices. There is one very useful GitHub action which is available by GitHub itself. It's called as the super linter. Linting is a process which allows you to verify that the developers, they are following best practices as per the different programming languages. And this super linter is what is published by GitHub itself, and it can validate your code or it can lint your code in more than 15 to 20 different languages. So to get started, we say on the actions, this is where we add new actions or GitHub actions to our repository. And this is the starter workflows that I was talking about earlier. So based on what is the code available in the repository, you can see that there are some suggestions which are coming and there are GitHub actions available for .NET Core code, There is GitHub action available for .NET Core desktop application, and for the other popular services as well, like deploying Node.js, then deploying things to AWS, building and deploying to Google Cloud. So all these options are available, and these are some of the popular ones. So let's say I want to start using this, which is the superlinter. And I want to say that I want to build this workflow myself. So what happens is when I create this, it creates a folder structure within my GitHub repository, which starts with .github. There is the workflows folder inside that. And then I can create a file which describes what are the different actions I want to perform. So let me say superlinter, and I will name this as superlinter.yaml. And I will take the settings from the earlier repository in the interest of time. And I will just replace all the contents here. So you can see in the steps here, what it does is it gives a name for this action, which is called as lint code base. And then we define what is the steps which have to happen. So I'm defining that on push to any of these branches, like the main or the feature branch. If somebody pushes a code, these are the jobs I want to execute. So I want to build, and the name of that job is lint code base. This should run on a Ubuntu version, Ubuntu latest. And the steps that it needs to perform is it needs to check out the code, get the latest version of the code, and then it needs to run this lint code base action. And I'm saying that this has to run on the default branch as main, and I'm specifying the GitHub token. So GitHub token is something which is automatically created by GitHub for us when we create a GitHub repository, and this is stored as a repository level or our workspace level setting. We don't have to worry about this. We can just use it in our applications. So with that, I can say start a commit here and create a superlinter, commit it into a main and commit a new file. So now I have created this workflow and I've committed this code into my repository. So in the actions, we should see that this workflow is triggered because I've said that this needs to be triggered when something gets pushed. And we can see that there is this lint code base. This is the name of the action. And if we go into this running action here, we can see what is happening. So there is one task within this particular action, which is to lint the code base. Sorry. So this will show us the status of what is happening when that particular code is getting executed or when that code is getting lint checked. While this is getting lint checked, let me go and just pull this update, because if I try to check in something now, it will say that my local repo is out of sync with the remote repo. So I pulled that edit file superlinter.yaml, and now it's available in my local. So you can see here that it sets up a job because we said that we need to run it on Ubuntu OS. So it will create that particular agent. It will have that agent created for us, and then it will get the latest versions of these actions. So we said we need a checkout action and we need a superlinter action. So these actions are downloaded and then it will start linting. So in my configuration, if we go back again and look at the superlinters configuration, let me scroll down to the bottom. We can see that we have said that validate all code base. So this is to validate everything that is there in our code repository. let me show you what are the things that the GitHub superlinter supports. But let's say if I don't want to validate all my code base and I want to validate only part of it. So let's say my code base contains C# code. There is a bit of JavaScript. There is a bit of Node.js in that. Or some other programming language combination within the application. I can say as part of this GitHub action, I want to execute the superlinter only for C# or only for JavaScript files. That is possible. So let me go back here and show you the superlinter documentation. If you search for GitHub superlinter, you will find the GitHub repo for that, and we will see what are the different languages it is currently supporting. So you can see here right now it has support for all these languages, starting with Ansible, the ARM template, AWS CloudFormation, C#, CSS, and the list is quite lengthy. And this list is getting added, or number of files or supported formats is getting added recursively. So you can expect more files formats to be supported here. So all this can be verified for the correct naming convention or correct guidelines. It uses the best practices for each of these programming languages and frameworks to validate that the programmer has written code using those guidelines. So let's go back and see the result of that if it has completed. So it is showing some of the validations or some of the violations here. You can see in the results it is still linting, but let's go and OK, it finished just now. Let me expand this. And in the log, you can see here that it has gone through some steps in checking all the keys, everything exists in terms of the secrets and all. And then it starts to look at different types of files. So you can see here there is a CS/HTML file for which there is currently no file type association. So we have a warning saying that it cannot get a file type or it cannot do a linting process on this type of file. So if we exclude the CS/HTML files, we can see other files where Ansible, it starts to look for Ansible. I did not put any filter, so it will try to execute the linting for all those languages which were mentioned there. So you can see it starts with Ansible. There are no Ansible files in my repository, so it skips that. Then it starts to look at these CS/HTML, and then it will start looking at CSS. And this is where you can see that in the CSS files, it tries to find, or it thinks that this is a problem because there is somewhere on line number 21 a comma and a new line is expected here. So as per the CSS best practices, we should have a comma and then it should be put on the new line. And in this case, this particular file, the site.css, doesn't follow that convention. That is why it's throwing up this error. So same way, it will continue for all the other types of files. So the advantage of this is nowadays we have many full stack developers and people from, let's say, a database background, they start to do front end development, or people from front end development, they are also required to work on some back end code. It might so happen that a person is not very well versed with the best practices when it comes to coding standard for that particular language. And using this automated process, we can easily identify if there are any violations like that. And this can be part of the CI/CD process where on a daily basis during every check-in, we find out what were the violations and it can be fixed quite easily. So we don't really need a person sitting there just to identify if there are any formatting issues with the code. This can help improve your maintainability of the code by following some of these best practices. So that was about the superlinter. So we saw that it's quite easy. In terms of the actions, we just defined a YAML file, superlinter.yaml, and we define what action has to be triggered onto our repository when somebody checks in to lint the whole of our code base. Now let's take this a step further. Let's say I want to perform more actions, or I want to check for additional things, but this time I want to use a third-party tool. So when we do DevOps, when we follow DevOps practices, there are different stages, like the build stage, there is the testing phase, there is the deployment phase, and there are different tools or different techniques which we use to validate at each of these stages. And one of the things which is quite common is to do static code analysis. And for doing static code analysis, we have a tool called Sonar Cloud. This is one of the well-known tool in the industry, which helps us to run analysis on the code basis, and it can help us identify by doing a static code analysis on the source code files if there are any bugs or any violations. So in the interest of time, I will take the example of one of the earlier integration I did with Sonar Cloud for the similar repository. So here you can see that this is also a same type of project, which is .NET Core. And just by running Sonar Cloud scanning on this code base, it can highlight that there are 11 bugs in this code based on the set of rules which are defined, and these are called as quality gates, or there is the quality profile. So we have a profile for C#, we have a SonarWay profile for CSS. If there is JavaScript, there is a SonarWay profile for JavaScript. So it tries to look at the things which are not just formatting. This will be like if you have a variable which is defined, but that variable is not getting used. If there is, let's say, duplicate code in your code base. So you can see here that 22% of my code is duplicate code. And like this, these kind of things can be automatically measured. They can be captured using Sonar Cloud. So I can integrate Sonar Cloud easily with my application. And for that, what I need to do is I need to allow Sonar Cloud to have access to my repository. So once I log in into the Sonar Cloud, I have in fact a detailed video in my YouTube channel. I'll post a link to that. You can find about the individual steps. So let me go and show you the part which is required to integrate this. So I will take the existing repo and show this example. So a couple of things. First thing we need is, even before we put the Sonar Cloud workflow in our project, we need a file called Sonar Properties or Sonar Project Properties. That's the convention. And for this, we need to provide two things. One is the organization, and the other one is the project key. Project key is used to store the results of our analysis, and organization is this is a concept which Sonar Cloud uses. So I can find these details here when I configure the project. Once I connect my Sonar Cloud to my repository in GitHub, I get a project key and I get an organization key. So I need to copy these two values and I need to put them in this file called as sonarproject.properties. And if I want to scan only a specific folder, again, like the Sonar superlinter, I can specify the sources folder here. So it will look for only that particular location. So let's say you are having a different convention when it comes to storing your source code. This is where you can override where is the location of your source files. Otherwise, it will look for all the files in your repository. Now, once I have this, the next thing is to configure that workflow in the GitHub action. So the process is similar. I start with the name and then I specify on what action or what trigger I have to perform this action. Similar to the superlinter, I am using the push as a trigger here into the main and the feature branches. And then in the jobs, I say I need to trigger a Sonar Cloud trigger. And again, this is running on Ubuntu latest version. The steps that I follow is check out the latest version of the repository, and then we analyze that using Sonar source. This is an action which is published by Sonar Cloud. The version is 1.3 in this case, and we specify the GitHub token, which is the common token, and then we specify the Sonar token. Now this is where we need a separate token so that the GitHub action can go and communicate, or it can integrate with Sonar Cloud. And how do we get this Sonar token? to get the Sonar token in the configuration of your project. So let's say this is the repository for which I want to enable the Sonar Cloud. I need to go into the settings of this project, and in the administration, I can go and add the key. So there is a key which needs to be created. So on the My Projects, so let's say this is the project, and on My organization, I go into the organization administration at the organization settings, and there will be a security setting. So again, you can see the video where that setting exactly exists. So basically what it does is it creates a key. So one last attempt. Let me see if I can find that. My organization. No, sorry, I forgot the exact location, but I'll share the video where that security key has to be created. Once we generate that key, we put that key as a secret in our repository. So in the repository settings, I will go back to the one which I'm using to show you, not this one. So okay. So in the settings here, you can see there is a secrets option, and in the secret, I need to add this as a secret. So I will get a value of the key and I can put that as a Sonar secret. Once this Sonar secret is added, that is the one I will use to verify or to connect and to push the results of my Sonar analysis into Sonar Cloud. So let me quickly go and make a small change to this particular repository, and we can see the Sonar Cloud scan triggered as part of this. So in the README, let me go and quickly add something. Try this link and let's say and I will go and push these changes. So we have one change here in the README file, and I've added git ignore to this. So let me add these files to the repository, then commit message. And then do a push. Okay, so in this repository, which I am showing right now, I've got 3 different workflows running. One of them is the superlinter, the other one is Sonar Cloud Scan. So let's see the Sonar Cloud Scan for this particular repository. So you see all those 3 workflows here. And as I did that check-in just about 20 seconds ago, all 3 of them have been triggered in parallel because all of them, they depend on the push action. So the first one is lint code base. The second one is deploy to AKS. I will come to this in a second or a little while later. And this one is the Sonar Cloud. So if we go into the details of this, the action is trigger Sonar Cloud, and we see the similar steps in action where the job is set up. It brings in the Sonar Cloud sources that are required. It clones the repository, which is the first step in our action, and then it starts to analyze. And once this analysis is done, the final output of this analysis will be pushed to that Sonar Cloud repository. So you can see here it's starting to analyze the results and what are the different quality profiles that it's using based on the code that I have. So it identifies that I have CS files, CSS files, JavaScript files, and it is pulling in all those profiles for those language validations. And then it will start with all these the static analysis of the code. So all the files would be analyzed in my code base. And once the analysis is finished, looks like it is done. So let me scroll down. So you can see here, this is where it is using that connection to say that what is the project and what is the key to which that project links to. That is what we put in the Sonar properties. And here you can see the source files are getting analyzed here. So it will look for things like code coverage. It will look for if there are any variables which are defined but they're not used, if there are any null pointer exceptions or possible null pointer exceptions and things like that, based on what are the rules defined for that language. So you can see here that the CS files in my project are being analyzed, and same way all the other files. And once the analysis is done, it pushes those results and it will give us a link using which we can find the analysis results. So this is the second kind of integration or second kind of action we can do using GitHub Actions, where we are connecting or integrating with a third-party service, which is Sonar Cloud in this, and we are analyzing our source code and storing the results of that analysis into Sonar Cloud. Now let's come to the third use case, or the part which is requiring the deployment of our code into target environment. And nowadays Docker containers and Kubernetes is quite popular. So I would like to show you an example where we can deploy our code to a Kubernetes cluster running in Azure Kubernetes Service using GitHub Action. To do that, I have a cluster created, and in this Kubernetes cluster, right now there is nothing which is deployed. So I created a couple of clusters and I was supposed to show something in the live demo. But again, we are almost close to the time. So let me use the pre-created cluster, but I'll show you how to connect the first instance. So this is the cluster where I don't have anything deployed right now. No application is running. So if you look at the workloads which are running on this particular cluster and under the deployments, these are all the default deployments or the deployments which are done by the Kubernetes cluster itself. There is no application specific deployment which has happened. Same thing for the pods, replica sets. So let's assume that I want to connect my code and I want to deploy my code onto this cluster. How can I get started? There is this deployment center preview available right now with Azure Kubernetes Service or AKS, where you can deploy your code from all these supported repositories, and GitHub is one of them. So we will say I want to connect to GitHub. Then select next. And when I say next, it will ask me to authorize. So the Azure portal or Azure services, they need to have access to the GitHub repository, and I can select which repo I want. So let's say I want that Hacktoberfest again. So once I select the repository, I can select which branch I want, and then I need to select a Docker file which contains the steps using which my container would be created for this application. So let me quickly show you what this Docker container looks like or Docker file looks like. So this is a standard Docker file which is required or which I'm using to build my application as a container image. So if you see here, it starts with SDK image, which is used for building the application. And this contains all the build tools. And I use a multi-stage build here in order to build my application, where in the first stage, I create a build environment or I create a stage called as build environment. I create a working directory in this called as application or app. I copy the source of this project. So this is relative to where my Docker file is currently sitting, and all this contents or the folder would be copied into this container now. Then I do a .NET restore and then I do a publish, and I publish it in the release configuration. I give the output folder as release output, and I'm specifying a flag here to say that no restore, which means I don't want to restore all the dependencies because I've already done it here. And once the application is built, if everything is fine, I will have application DLL as part of this .NET publish command in the release output. So this is another step which I really like about automating all the steps which we perform as part of our build and deployment. So imagine you have a team of 10 people and you ask those people to build the application. You will invariably find that most of them will have different approach to building the application, and sometimes you will see that people forget to change the configuration from debug to release, and we will have the debug symbols being pushed to the environments where they are not supposed to be pushed. So what this process is trying to do is to standardize the way we are building our application. So no matter who runs this build, this step would be the same as long as we are using this Docker file, and it's standard for every developer to use this kind of steps. So there is no again the problem or again the concept of it works on my machine or somebody did something different. By standardizing these steps, we are making sure that all the people in the team follow exactly the same steps to build the application and to come up with the release output of the application. Now, once I have the release output available, I take it from my build stage and I use a different base image here because I want to run this in let's say a test environment or UAT environment and production environment, and I don't need the build tools to be available. Once the application is built, I can use the build output and I just need the runtime or the minimum things to run it on the target environment. So that is where I change my build image from the SDK to ASP.NET Core runtime image. And this is a very lightweight version. It doesn't contain any build tools, any things out other than the runtime. So I have only the things which are required to run my application, and I copy the release output and I put it inside this. And then I specify what should happen when the instance of this particular image is created by using entry point application, the instruction. So this will tell when the instance of this container is created, it should call this Hacktoberfest sg.dll, which is available in that output. So this Docker file is what I specify here in the Docker path. And then I need to specify if I want to expose this as a service outside of the Kubernetes cluster, what is the port and what is the context? Where exactly is this Docker file sitting? Once I provide all this, this deployment center will build some things behind the scenes, and it will add a GitHub action to my repository. And if I go into the code base again, what I get as the output of that is first thing is this GitHub action, which is called as build and deploy. It does a checkout again. It runs on Ubuntu latest. It gets all the latest code and it does all these steps. So it logs in into the container registry. So sorry, if I put this here, right? Let me put that Docker file path. Okay, it's the same one. So all these are found. So let's say I want to expose it on port 80. Then when I say next, this is where this will ask you, the wizard will ask you to specify which is your container registry. Do you want to create a new one or you want to use an existing one? So let me say I want to use the existing one and I already have a existing container registry in my resources. So it will use that and then the namespace. So in the namespace, what is the namespace I want to use? Sorry, this one was for the namespace itself. So let's say I want to create a new namespace. So this is the namespace I want to create. Namespace is a concept in Kubernetes which allows you to segregate different resources or combine different resources into a logical unit. So I will use the default here. And when it comes to the container registry, this is what I was saying. So it will ask us whether we want to create a new container registry or use an existing one. So I will use the existing container registry, and that is all which is required to configure this GitHub action. So behind the scenes, it will go and link all these things. So it will link the container registry. It will link to this Kubernetes cluster. It will also link the GitHub repository in GitHub, the source code. And when a check-in happens, it will go through the steps of building the containers, pushing it to the container registry, getting the latest version of that, and then deploying it. So how does it do that? The first thing it does is it connects to the, it logs in into the container registry using the Docker login, and it will use the username and password, and it generates these secrets and it automatically puts them in my repository. So if I go back into my GitHub repo, and if I look at the settings here, you look at the secrets, when I added those configurations, automatically the container registry username, password, and the Kubernetes config, kubeconfig file, they were put as the secrets here. This happens when that wizard completes. And once I have all this information, that information is used as part of the different steps. So the first thing it does is it connects using these secrets to the container registry, to the Kubernetes context. It creates a namespace. It also creates a secret which is used to pull the images, and then it does the deployment. So it will also create a deployment and a service as manifest in my repository. But before that, we should also have the Docker. Yeah, this is the step I was saying. So once the Docker login is done, it will build the image using Docker build command. And if the image is successfully built, it will push that image to the container registry. So this is where that Docker file gets used. So you saw the path where I was specifying it in the wizard. So it will use that relative path to use that Docker file as a reference. And with that, these are the steps which goes through the process of taking the latest version of the code, building it using Docker, connecting to the container registry and pushing the Docker image. And if all this is successful, then it goes and starts the deployment into the Kubernetes cluster. So the manifest, these are pretty standard. So you have a deployment file which is created. It's a kind of deployment. The replicas it puts is 2 by default, and it will use whatever was the namespace we provided there. So you can see the namespace was used, and it will also create the containers, and it will put the image here. So you can see that all this is automatically generated via that wizard. And then on top of that deployment, we have the service. So service is the one which is exposing this outside of the Kubernetes cluster. So we see that the container is exposing port 80. So this comes from the Docker file. We are not explicitly exposing anything here. So these default images or the base images that we are using, they expose port 80. So what we are saying here is we are doing a port mapping. The port on the container is 80, and I want to expose port 80 outside as well as a standard load balancer. So if all this goes fine, we should have the application running, and we should be able to access it. So if I go on the cluster, right, let's go back and use the cluster where this application is deployed. In the workloads, if we filter on the namespace here, we can see now there is Hacktoberfest as the namespace. This has this particular deployment, which happened about 11 hours ago, and that was the last time something got pushed here. Okay. And we can access the site as well. So if I go into the services and the ingress, again filter on the Hacktoberfest namespace, we can see this is the external IP where the site is accessible, and this is the content of the index page. So we have GitHub action is great and Hacktoberfest is the greatest. We can do a quick test to see that if we make a change, does it really update it or not? So in the index, I will add something and let's check this in. So again, going back to the actions, we should see the action triggered just about 10 seconds ago. And let's go and look at this one, the deploy to AKS. So in the steps you can see here, again, it's getting the latest version of the action. Then it does the Docker login. It will do the Docker push to the container registry of those images if something has got changed. So you can see whatever steps we mentioned, those are the ones which are executed here as part of the Docker build. And here it has been successfully tagged and it is also pushed. Then once the image is pushed, it's creating the namespace and it will go and deploy it onto the Kubernetes cluster. So if everything went fine, we should see our change here. So you can see this has been now updated to the whatever updated text we put in. So with that, let me go back to the presentation. I will quickly cover this part about the tools. So when it comes to the tools, right, we talked about very few tools here, like the static analysis code using Sonar Cloud. We looked at the Kubernetes cluster and how it integrates with Azure Container Registry and the AKS. But in a typical enterprise, you will have various tools. I've just given a screenshot from one of the blogs here. You can see that for each type of the activity, like the build, planning, then deployment, and even when it comes to monitoring and alerting, there are various options. Almost every tool vendor has their offering when it comes to DevOps, and this is maturing day by day. You have so many options available, and there was this recent blog post which says Ultimate DevOps Tools Ecosystem. So if you look at the complete ecosystem, right, again, it's very huge. And it can be quite confusing sometimes which tool to use or what to use. My suggestion is look for things which are really required for your project. So here I've put CI/CD for containers application. This is what we try to do, or what we did as part of the deployment here. I didn't use Azure repos, but we use GitHub here. But in general, the pipeline is something similar like this. We have an engineer who codes, then that code gets pushed into the repo. Then we have the series of steps which are run as part of, let's say, Azure DevOps or GitHub Actions. The output of that goes into the container registry, and then we have the deployment happening in target environment, which was Azure Kubernetes cluster here, but this can be app services or this can be any other cloud provider as well. And finally, we also have to bring in the monitoring and alerting aspect, where we tied back into how we monitor and how we see the running services like the SRE practices. This is an example for a simple application. The other one is where you introduce also the security practices, what normally now we call DevSecOps, where it's not just development and the operations. We are also introducing, or we are also bringing in the best practices for the security. Like instead of doing your pen test or other security test towards the end of your release cycle, you can automate it. You can bring it as early as possible and do it as part of your regular CI/CD pipeline. So this link which I have put is a very good reference to see how we can integrate security best practices into the DevOps pipelines and build DevSecOps pipelines. So the fundamental thing, or the main components that we have to understand, right? Again, forget about the names of the tools here. This is coming from Splunk, what they are using as a reference. But the key areas or key concepts that I would like you to take away is in a DevOps pipeline or DevSecOps pipeline, we should identify tools which are required for doing continuous integration, continuously integrating the code on regular basis, and then doing continuous deployment. One of the things which is very common nowadays is also to follow this practice for building your infrastructure. And we have infrastructure as code or configuration management. Things like Terraform is quite popular in this area. If you are going multi-cloud and you want to have something which can be used across the cloud, you don't want to limit yourself just to, let's say, AWS or Azure or Google Cloud. For configuration management, we could use things like Terraform. Then when it comes to monitoring and alerting, you have different sets of tools, and then it's the communication and the security aspects. So if we cater to these 4 or 5 main categories and we choose the right tool from each of those categories, you can get started. You can have a very good secure DevOps pipelines. And here is another example again, which is talking about the different kinds of activities which happen during a DevSecOps pipeline build. So you see, first it is the code commit and what can be done. Like this can be checked. You can have very good IDE integrations that can be plugins. Like for example, Visual Studio has many plugins. If you are from a Java background, IntelliJ has plugins which can help you identify some code smells and things like that right in your development environment. You can have things like pre-commit hooks. So if somebody tries to commit something, Justin was talking about having a proper message. So one of the things we follow in our organization is every time you do a commit, you should have a work item linked to that. So if somebody doesn't put a reference to a work item, right, that commit would be rejected. So these kind of things can be done during the code commit phases. Then during the build, you have the static code analysis. When you do the deployment, you have things like dynamic code analysis. And even when the application is running in your target environment, you can have things which check what is actually happening when the things are running. So here are some of the tools and references you can look at. In summary, what we looked at is DevOps. It helps us to automate the processes and the practices that we follow for building and deploying our applications. GitHub Actions, it helps us to automate the workflows on our GitHub repositories. And when it comes to having the DevSecOps integration, we can use security best practices, and we have tools which can be integrated within our DevOps pipeline so that security scanning and the security aspects are also handled right early in the life cycle of the project. With that, I would like to share some references with you. And if you would like to see some videos, here is a recent one from a Microsoft Ignite event, which happened a couple of weeks back. And there is also quite a lot of learning paths available or modules available on MS Learn. If you just search with the product as GitHub, you will get many options. We have things around GitHub Actions. We have best practices and various modules which you can use to enhance your knowledge of GitHub as well as GitHub Actions and CI/CD in general. Thank you. Thanks a lot for joining this session, and apologize for the technical problems we had initially at the start of the session. So if you joined in late and you're still wondering, my name is Nilesh. These are my social media handles. Feel free to connect with me if you have any doubts, any questions. I'm happy to answer them.
Okay. Due to Eng Teong got some technical issue of his laptop, so that you can check in his YouTube channel about the Azure planning and portfolio management with Azure bot. There is a video for that YouTube. So that let us continue how to make your first pull request by me. Okay, who am I? I am Microsoft MVP in Microsoft Azure for this year, for this FY21. Yeah, FY21, and also Big Four. I am a senior IT developer for Big Four company, and most of the time I'm doing the how to say, chatbot and also Power Platform things for currently now. And also Microsoft certified in Azure Security Engineer Associate. Before we start, we got some message from the DigitalOcean DigitalOcean CEO. Okay, around 2 to 3 minutes. Let's go. Okay, I hope you can hear me now.
Hi, Yancey Spruill here, DigitalOcean CEO, and I'd like to welcome you to the 7th annual Hacktoberfest. Hacktoberfest is a month-long celebration of open source software for all 31 days in October. And in this event, this month-long event, we bring together over 100,000 people to contribute to the betterment of open source software. At this annual event, we have open source projects where developers become contributors, students and early learners, learn more and build their passion and experience. And we gather people together online. Historically, we've done offline, but in 2020, I suspect will be predominantly online. But we bring people together from over 150 countries throughout the world. At DigitalOcean, one of our core values is around community. And a pillar of the language of that value is we say, our community is bigger than just us. And I can find no better representation of our investment and our passion for fostering the global community of developers and entrepreneurs than Hacktoberfest. It's an important element for us because it brings so many people together in this very global way for 31 days, and it generates so much excitement and passion around one of our core value propositions as a business, which is around open source. And what we believe happens during the month of Hacktoberfest, not only do we bring people together, but we help people learn and we help people grow. And that's a fundamental tenet of what we're all about at DigitalOcean in terms of enabling global entrepreneurs and developers to test ideas, build their businesses, and chase their dreams. So what we hope that you'll gain is that you'll participate, you'll learn a little bit more, you'll join a project, you'll meet new people, and you'll help make open source software better for the legions of people who use it today and well into the future. So with that, I can't wait to see you all and what you will come up with this year at Hacktoberfest. And remember that for those projects that are accepted, you get the famous DigitalOcean Hacktoberfest t-shirt, a prize well worth earning during the month of October. So until then, be well, and we'll see you in October.
Okay, let me. Okay, you should you will need to make a pull request with how to get a t-shirt for the Hacktoberfest. You must make a pull request, and also the maintainer must approve your pull request so that you're only eligible to get the t-shirt. Remember, this event only from 1st October until the October 31st. You can try, if you last minute you want to submit again, you can try in Singapore time around 1st of November. Maybe you can try, because I saw the event start with the 31st of 30 of September. Start got people submit a pull request already. Maybe you can try and error. If you this year can't submit, you can start from practice to submit to other project. Then so that next year you join again with Hacktoberfest. Okay, let me go to how to make a first pull request. Okay, now let's see. Okay, now I have the Eng Teong Venice. Wait, let me share screen. Share my desktop screen. Okay, now I have the Eng Teong GitHub account and my repo. Here I got open up the Azure Mapboard Builder that label with the Hacktoberfest and Hacktoberfest 2020, because I want to let people to try out how to make a pull request and update the source code for me, because this one around 1 year I does not 11 months I does not update the source code, because maybe the Azure map and also Azure map and Azure Board Services already update their API. At first, for today's demo, I just do a simple thing. You should update the source code. At first, you need to forward my project repo. Okay, now it's Cteong Venice / Azure Mapboard Builder. Then you can open with your with your GitHub desktop, or open with your GitHub code space. Or you can if you already download, most of my friends, they are newbie, they download the source code, then and change the source code at their GitHub, at their Visual Studio. Then after that, they come back here to update the source code. Yeah. For example, this one, because for last time demo, I had hard code for the line ID, because this Azure map that I want to get the bus number or bus time schedule for bus number 206, because I only know the bus go through my house is a 206 in the Penang, that Penang Island, that you want to go there to having a nice food at there, the famous food, laksa and so on. And here, if you want to change it, then you can go here, just edit the file. For today's purpose, I think I just do a simple comment. Actually, this is not a very good very good submit report, because this will be report or hit by the maintenance, and maybe you will get report to the DigitalOcean because it's considered as a spam. Okay. We'll just check the please update the API. No, update and check the API, because seeing can't retrieve. Okay. Very first thing, you must give the very first impression. Describe what you have changed. Chat API for Azure map, and also the code. Then after that, you just commit and change. If you are the maintainer for this project, let's go back to my account. I think I have. Let me see. Okay. I think got some. Got one bunch already. Oh, not this. Okay. After you commit, then I think it will be have something. The maintenance must be merged to the merge your code to the project. Then after that, it should be, after that the maintenance will be set the label with the Hacktoberfest, so that you can eligible to get to submit your first pull request for your Hacktoberfest. Okay, let's see how they do the first pull request from the DigitalOcean. Okay, let's move on. Over.
Welcome to Hacktoberfest 2020. Hacktoberfest is a month-long celebration of open source software run by DigitalOcean. Hacktoberfest is open to everyone in our global community. To participate, you'll need to submit 4 quality pull requests to public GitHub repositories. When you do, You'll earn some swag, including your very own Hacktoberfest 2020 t-shirt. You can sign up anytime between October 1st and October 31st, and we encourage you to connect with other developers and Hacktoberfest enthusiasts for virtual events and information sessions starting in September. In this quick video, we'll introduce you to Git and GitHub, the version control system that we'll be using to track your progress and repository hosting service that shares projects to collaborate on. By the end of this tutorial, you'll be ready to submit your first pull request and will be well on your way to participating in Hacktoberfest. Before we begin with Git and GitHub, let's talk about version control. When developers work on a project together, oftentimes they'll need to work on the same code base. While they're working, each developer needs to know about what changes the other dev made, so as not to duplicate work or write code over what has already been done. A version control system serves as a saving program for the code, where it assigns a version to a project and tracks changes made over time to each file in the project. In this way, developers can work together on a project by checking in with the latest version to see the changes made before working on their portion of the project's code. Git, a version control system used to manage developer projects of all sizes, was created in 2005 by Linus Torvalds, the creator of Linux, to help developers contribute code and share code revisions in a way that was fast, efficient, and inexpensive. Git creates code repositories to help developers edit, share, and publish code for all. GitHub is a cloud-based repository hosting service that allows developers to take code that they've written on their local machines and share it with the world. GitHub provides a way to share the version track projects on your local computer publicly through repositories or central file locations, and depending on the project's availability, it can either be a private or a public repository. Other developers can continue the project to edit the code, provide insight, and more. To get started with GitHub, you can create an account at github.com. We have links on the Hacktoberfest resources page that details exactly how to get started with GitHub. Check it out after this video. All right, let's get started cloning and editing our first repo. First, let's navigate to the repo that we'd like to clone. For the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to use our Haiku repo. If you're following along with me, we've provided the link in the transcript for you to clone this repo as well. So I found a repo that looks interesting to work on that I can contribute meaningful content to. Remember, each of the pull requests you submit for Hacktoberfest should contribute to an existing repo in a way that helps the project to thrive. Take some time to pick one that resonates with you before starting. All right, before I clone this repo, that is, take a copy of the code here on GitHub onto my local machine, I want to take a copy of the whole repo into my own GitHub account. To do this, I'll make a fork of the repo. It's like I'm taking a bite of it, a copy that I can use to edit that doesn't affect the main or source code base. I'll navigate to click the fork button. Then watch as GitHub takes this repo and adds it as a copy to my account. As you see, now my name appears as the creator of this repo, which is a fork of the main Haiku repo. Next, I'll need to navigate over to my command line interface. I'm using Terminal on Macs, but there's a number of command line interfaces that are available for your OS. Use the one that works best for you. Git also offers a graphical interface that allows you to edit repos with visual commands. A link to download and learn more about that interface is available as a resource. In the terminal, I'm going to enter git clone. This command will clone or copy the copy that I just created from the Haiku repo down to my local machine. This will enable me to make changes to the code base locally or on my own machine to upload to the cloud remotely. Awesome. So we have the Haiku repo down on our local machine, and now we're ready to make a change. Using the command line interface, I'm going to navigate to the folder of our clone repo, Haiku repo, by using cd or change directory. I'm using Visual Studio Code as my text editor and IDE of choice. There's a number of editors and IDEs or integrated development environments out there that allow you to write code in a number of languages and format it using best practices, snippets, and more. While Visual Studio Code is just one IDE, I'd suggest checking out a few and picking the one that works best for your coding environment. Resources on picking an IDE can be found on our Hacktoberfest resource page. Now, in a situation where I'm in an unfamiliar code base, I take my time to read and understand everything that's going on and find parts of the code that I might make more efficient or suggest different solutions for. It's worth it to fully understand the code base and read any associated documentation provided before making changes. Now that we've made a change to the Haiku repo, we'll need to track and save that change. The first step in tracking your change is to add it to the version you're working on. To do that, we'll execute the command git add. Writing the command in this way allows you to add all changes made to the repo across files. If you need to only submit changes to an individual file, use git add in the name of file. After we add, we'll get no confirmation. To see your changes, you can execute the command git status. This allows you to check on the status of your tracked changes. We'll see that your file has been added, but not committed as a change. Git provides this step in the event that you need to amend a change before officially tracking it as new or edited code. Next, let's commit our change. We're confident that it's right and would like to submit this change for consideration of those who maintain the project. I'll execute the command git commit and add a message with /m so that other developers who are collaborating on this project will know what my changes are. In this way, everyone can be informed of changes that are made. This message is tracked along with the commit ID in my username so other developers know who added this change. After committing, I'll need to push my changes from my local machine to the remote repository on GitHub. To do this, I'll execute the command git push. Here, we can designate an origin for the push. In this instance, we want it to go straight to the main repo that I forked from the source Haiku repo. So far, we've identified a repo that we'd like to edit. We took a copy of the repo onto our GitHub account and local machine using fork and clone. We then made a change and submitted our change with git add, then solidified our change by running git commit, which committed the change, and git push, which pushed our change from the local machine to the remote repository on GitHub. If we look on GitHub now, we'll see that the change we made is reflected in the files in our copy of the repo. Exciting! We're now ready to let the maintainers of the project know that we have a change to the repo that we're confident about and ready to submit. To do this, we'll click the pull request button here to the right. After the pull request button is clicked, a new page will open with a form that explains the changes we made and shows if the changes made will in any way conflict with the existing content. We'll add in an appropriate title that details the change, and in the description, add an explanation of what changes were made and why. What you add here can vary depending on the project. Take a look at the project's collaboration guidelines to make sure your pull request is formatted correctly. After adding in that information, we'll scan the PR page to make sure that our committed change does not conflict. If everything checks out, we'll get a green Submit Pull Request button at the bottom that escalates our request to make a change to the source Haiku poem code base that will be live for anyone viewing that main branch. Be patient. It may take maintainers some time to review your request. Amendments and comments can be added on the pull request history, submitted a change, find the project. For additional information about Hacktoberfest, visit our main page. For additional information about Git and GitHub, visit github.com. Happy Hacktoberfest 2020.
Okay. Just now, the video show you how to make a pull request from the DigitalOcean. by using the Visual Studio Code. Other than that, Nilesh got mentioned about the dev setup. The tools, the tools he's used is the Sonar Cloud. Other than that, you can use the OSOP Jam. OSOP Jam is also commonly installed in the developer machine, because before submit to a DevOps and also to the pen tester, they were using the OSOP to test whether their application in the top 10 OSOP API issue. You can follow my blog. I already do it, how to integrate the OSOP Jam by using the GitHub action. Okay, and here for your reference, you can join the Hacktoberfest with the hacktoberfest.digitalocean.com. Other than just now at the beginning, I already show you the project. I need you all to maintain it. Then I also share the URL for you. It's all about the chatbot and Azure map. Okay, at last, I introduce you about the Tech Connect. Tech Connect is share about the blog and article and also video from Singapore and also from Malaysia by the MVP. You can watch all the video or article from this website, techconnect.io. Okay, that's all for today. Thank you very much for the speaker, Justin, Nilesh, and the backend team, Riza, Chulin, and Malvin. For this year Hacktoberfest, happy Hacktoberfest, and don't forget this year also got Beer Fest, but take your safety first. Consider your safety first before join any event. Thank you very much for everyone. Happy weekend. If you got any question, please let us know at the comment or the meetup group. Thank you.